Paul Lynde had a rich career as an actor, comedian, and a game show panelist. Sadly, he died young, at age 55, but lived a full life. Join Factsverse to learn about the real reason Paul Lynde was fired from Hollywood Squares. Paul Edward Lynde was born June 13, 1926, in Mount Vernon, Ohio. He came from humble beginnings, as his father Hoy owned a meat market. He was the fifth among 6 children. While his life was rather normal growing up, things became tougher when he reached his 20s. First, one of his brothers died when he was 18, and when he was 23, both his parents died. After graduating high school, he attended Northwestern University, where he majored in drama and speech. He was also heavily involved in theatrical productions, and this gave him the necessary training for his professional career. After college, he moved to New York City to pursue his entertainment career. In the meantime, he worked odd jobs to survive while trying to make it big in showbiz. He decided to start working as a stand-up comedian. This was one of the easiest ways to break into show business and didn't require a big investment, and it was the best way to showcase your comedic talents. After performing in nightclubs, he eventually made his Broadway debut in 1952 in a revue show. This was his breakthrough and the catalyst to help him land more work. It was in this decade he also appeared on TV sitcoms like Stanley and The Martha Raye Show. He appeared in the stage play Bye Bye Birdie, as well as the movie adaptation. The 1960s was when his career really took off, and he had roles in many popular TV shows of the time, including The Munsters, Bewitched, F Troop, I Dream of Jeannie, and The Patty Duke Show. But his role as Harold on Bewitched is what made him a star, and what made him one of the most recognizable faces on American television. Hollywood Squares. The Hollywood Squares, later shortened to Hollywood Squares, made its debut on October 17, 1966. That was the same year Paul made his debut as one of the panelists, occupying the center square. He was such a sensation on the show and was the center of attention, literally. In fact, it was often rumored he had a contractual clause that he was always supposed to occupy the center square. This wasn't true, but whoever decided he should be in the center square made the right decision. He's still remembered as one of the most memorable panelists on Hollywood Squares. The permanent spot in the center of the squares meant he'd be called upon at least once per show. This gave him more airtime and helped bring him more stardom. He became known not just for his answers, but also his witty remarks. Many of them were laced with double entendres, and sometimes the humor came off as campy and seemed to allude to his sexuality, which wasn't a public fact at the time. He appeared 707 times on the show from 1966 to 79. He left in 1979, though he made a brief return in 1980 and remained on the show until it got canceled in its original form in 1981. He became a star and a rich man thanks to Hollywood Squares, and the show brought him more success over his stand-up career or his acting career. It's no surprise that the show plummeted when he took his hiatus, and though it's had many spin-offs since then, fans of Hollywood Squares agree that Paul Lynde is one of the best things to happen to the show, and there's really no other celebrity who's taken the place he once held. He made Hollywood Squares, and Hollywood Squares made him. The real reason Paul was fired from Hollywood Squares. While the show was the reason for his success, it's also what, paradoxically, made it harder for him to progress. Hollywood Squares literally and figuratively boxed him in. While audiences loved him as the center square, he was a versatile entertainer and wanted to take upon different kinds of roles. He felt he wasn't getting more offers for TV shows or films, which is what he really wanted. He wanted to be taken seriously as an actor, and while Hollywood Squares brought him fame and fortune, it didn't bring him satisfaction after doing so many shows. It was rumored he was perhaps fired due to his personal troubles, but the real reason he was fired is because he wanted to call it quits. The producers managed to convince him to return in 1980, but by that time the show had lost its luster. He moved on and continued to pursue other projects, though his career and life were now on its final chapter. While Paul brought us many laughs, he never seemed to get over the tragedies of his life. He was a heavy drinker, and his poor health made it harder for him to work and would cause him to have many problems in his life. Not to mention, he was a homosexual in a time when people weren't as open-minded, despite the seemingly liberal attitudes of the 60s and 70s. Later in the 70s, he did a lot of voice acting roles, including work in films such as Charlotte's Web and shows such as Perils of Penelope Pitstop. His final role was in the 1979 comedy film The Villain. However, once he became a star on Hollywood squares, it defined his career, and his TV acting and film acting wasn't highly regarded. Following his death, he was often described as a frustrated actor who had to settle with appearing on a game show. His health worsened throughout the late 70s and 80s, and his friends got concerned. On January 10, 1982, a few months after Hollywood Squares ended, Paul Lynde died of a heart attack. He was only 55. Paul Lynde's legacy. It's tough to describe Paul's legacy and whether his life was full of joy or tragedy. Though he spent much of his career in a square, he said he didn't like being put in a box. On one hand, he was one of the most famous faces on TV and made a fortune through it. On the other hand, perhaps we only got to see a sliver of his talents, and had times been different, we would have seen his full talents. Perhaps the fact that he had to hide his sexuality also took its toll on him. While some members of the gay community revered him, others lamented him due to his campy behavior, which many felt was becoming blasé and too stereotypical and perhaps even offensive. For some, he's remembered fondly, while others have forgotten him. One wonders if he was alive today, whether he'd reflect upon his career with joy or whether he'd have regrets, wishing he got to focus more on acting rather than answering questions. But we'd like to remember him as one of our greatest entertainers who brought us nothing but joy and laughter. We now know that the real reason Paul Lynde was fired from Hollywood Squares was because he wanted to move on from it. Many celebrities whom we love aren't as pleased about their careers as we are. Peter Sellers wasn't always pleased with his performances as Inspector Clouseau. Dustin Hoffman acted in Straw Dogs just for the money and didn't care for the film, even though many people consider it to be one of his best roles. Regardless of how Paul Lynde felt about Hollywood Squares, we're glad he was always the center of attention. Now it's time to hear from you. Are you a fan of Paul Lynde? What do you think about the struggles he had in his life and his time on Hollywood Squares? Do you think many entertainers from the past who were LGBTQ would have had an easier time today? Or would they have had more competition now that attitudes are more open? Let us know in the comments section below.